The silence is deafening at 3:47 a.m. when the thoughts become so loud they drown out everything else. And I'm lying here in my childhood bedroom, 20 years old, and wondering how someone can fail at absolutely everything while the rest of the world sleeps peacefully around them. I'm Joe Martinez, and I've become an expert in failure. Failed out of community college after 2 semesters because I couldn't focus on anything except the voice in my head telling me I wasn't smart enough. Failed at love when Sarah told me she needed space after 6 months of me being too clingy, too insecure, too much of everything wrong and not enough of anything right. Failed at my pet food supply business that was supposed to be my path to independence, but instead became another reminder that I can't even sell kibble to dog owners. The paradox that's eating me alive is this. I'm surrounded by people who care about me, yet I feel completely alone. My parents love me. My little sister Emma still looks up to me somehow. My friends text to check in. But none of that matters when the darkness inside my head is louder than every voice trying to reach me. Tonight, the spiral started with a simple Instagram scroll. College friends posting internship acceptances. Sarah with her new boyfriend at some beach I can't afford to visit. Former classmates announcing promotions at companies that wouldn't even call me back. Each post felt like evidence that everyone else had figured out some secret to life that I was never taught. The pet food business was supposed to be different. Everyone has pets. I'd reasoned 6 months ago when I convinced my dad to co-sign a loan for inventory. It's recession-proof. But sitting in our garage surrounded by 50 bags of premium dog food that haven't moved in weeks, I realized I was wrong about that too. The worst part isn't even the financial failure. It's the look in my dad's eyes when he sees me hauling another rejected order back from a pet store that already has a supplier. He doesn't say anything, but I know he's wondering where he went wrong raising a son who can't even succeed at something as simple as selling food to hungry animals. Joey, you okay up there? Mom's voice drifts up the stairs, and I realize I've been pacing loud enough to wake the house. Fine, Mom. Just can't sleep. But I'm not fine. Nothing is fine. And lying here in the dark, I can feel the weight of every failure crushing down on my chest like a physical force. The scholarship I lost. The girl who left. The business that's hemorrhaging my parents' money. The future that seems to shrink a little more each day. The thoughts come in waves. You're worthless. Everyone can see you're a fraud. Why do you even bother trying? The world will be better without your constant failures dragging everyone down. I know these thoughts are toxic. I know they're not rational. But knowing something and feeling it are two different things. And right now, the feeling is winning by a landslide. What terrifies me most is how comfortable I'm becoming with this darkness. How easy it would be to just stop trying. Stop pretending I'm going to figure this out. Stop disappointing people who still believe in me for reasons I can't understand. But there's something else stirring in the silence. Something that refuses to be quiet even when everything else in my life is screaming failure. It's small and stubborn and doesn't make logical sense, but it's there. The refusal to let this be the end of my story. Maybe it's a memory of Emma telling her friends that her big brother is going to be somebody important someday. Maybe it's the sight of my parents still setting a place for me at dinner, even though I've been hiding in my room for days. Maybe it's just pure stubbornness inherited from a long line of people who survived worse than this. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, or if I'll ever figure out how to be the person everyone seems to think I can become. But lying here in the darkness, I make a decision that surprises even me. I'm not going down without a fight. The question that will haunt me for the next year is this. How do you fight an enemy that lives inside your own head? How do you win a war against yourself? I had no idea that the answer would come from someone who'd fought the same battle and discovered that surviving yourself isn't about winning. It's about learning to coexist with the darkness while refusing to let it make your decisions. The weeks following my 3 a.m. breakdown became a masterclass in how good intentions and desperate motivation can make a bad situation catastrophically worse. I threw myself into what I called Operation Life Fix, a systematic attempt to solve all my problems through sheer force of will and positive thinking. First came the self-help phase. I devoured every motivational book I could find. Think and Grow Rich, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, You Are a Badass. I filled notebooks with inspiring quotes and action plans that looked impressive on paper, but felt hollow when I tried to implement them. Believe in yourself, the book shouted. But how do you believe in someone who's failed at everything they've touched? I tried to resurrect the pet food business with renewed energy, convinced that my previous failures were just due to lack of effort. I cold called every pet store within a 50-mile radius, pitched dog owners at the local park, even set up a table at the farmer's market with handmade signs about premium nutrition for your furry family. The rejections kept coming. We're all set with our current supplier. Not interested. Maybe try Petco? Each? No. Felt personal, like they weren't just rejecting my product, but rejecting me as a human being worth taking seriously. After 3 weeks of aggressive sales efforts, I'd moved exactly 2 bags of food. One to Mrs. Henderson next door, who probably bought out of pity, and another to a guy at the farmer's market who turned out to be trying to hit on me, not actually interested in dog food. The failure felt worse this time because I tried so hard. If I couldn't succeed even when I was giving it everything I had, what did that say about me? Next came the exercise and routine phase. I'd read that depression was just chemical, that endorphins and structure could fix anything. I set my alarm for 5 a.m., bought running shoes I couldn't afford, and committed to transforming my body and mind through physical discipline. The first morning, I made a half a mile before walking home defeated, lungs burning, legs aching, spirit crushed. The second morning, it was raining. The third morning, I slept through my alarm. By the end of the week, the running shoes sat in my closet, like expensive accusations of my own weakness. Maybe you should see someone, my mom suggested gently one morning, finding me still in bed at noon, like a counselor or... I'm fine. I snapped, though we both knew it was a lie. The idea of admitting to a stranger that I couldn't handle basic adult responsibilities felt like another failure to add to the growing list. The breaking point came during what should have been a simple family dinner. Emma was excitedly telling us about her acceptance to the summer science program she'd applied for, the same kind of achievement that used to come naturally to me before my brain decided to sabotage everything I touched. That's amazing, Mija, Dad said, beaming with pride. You're going to do incredible things. Watching my 15-year-old sister succeed where I'd failed, seeing my parents' faces light up with the kind of pride I hadn't given them in years, something inside me shattered completely. I excused myself from the table and locked myself in the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection and saw a stranger. Hollow eyes, poor posture, the face of someone who'd given up on himself so thoroughly that he'd forgotten what hope looked like. That's when the really dark thoughts started. Not just, I'm a failure, but everyone would be better off without me. Not just, I can't do anything right, but I should just disappear and stop being a burden. The thoughts were so loud, so persistent, so logical sounding that they scared me. For the first time in my life, I understood how people could reach a point where they couldn't see any other way out. I spent the rest of that night pacing my room, alternating between panic and numbness. Terrified of my own mind, but unable to escape it. Every strategy I tried had made things worse. Every attempt at improvement had led to deeper failure. Every effort to pull myself out of the hole had just made the hole deeper. Sitting there in the dark, surrounded by the evidence of my failures. Unopened books, unworn running shoes, unpaid bills from the business disaster. I finally admitted something I've been avoiding. I couldn't fix this alone. But admitting I needed help felt like admitting defeat, and I wasn't sure I had any fight left in me. The voice in my head had gotten so strong, so convincing, that it was starting to feel more real than the voices of people who still believed in me. That's when I did something that surprised even me. I Googled how to not hate yourself at 2 a.m., desperate for anything that might offer a different perspective on the war raging inside my head. What I found was a discussion forum where people shared their stories of surviving their own darkness. Real people, not motivational speakers or self-help gurus, but regular folks who'd been where I was and somehow made it to the other side. Reading their stories, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. I wasn't alone in this. Other people had fought the same battle and lived to tell about it. But the question remained, how do you start climbing out a hole when you can barely remember what ground level looks like? The online support group was called Surviving Yourself, and I've been lurking in their forums for 2 weeks, reading other people's stories of mental health struggles without having the courage to post anything myself. That's where I first encountered William Bruce, not as a mentor, but as someone whose posts had a different quality than the others, raw, more scientific, but somehow more hopeful. His bio said he was 34, lived in Portland, Oregon, and described himself as neuropsychological disorder survivor turned peer counselor. What caught my attention wasn't his credentials, but a post he'd written about the neuroscience of rock bottom that made me feel understood in a way no self-help book ever had. The brain in crisis doesn't think clearly because it's not supposed to, he'd written. It's in survival mode, and survival mode is about getting through the next hour, not building a future. Understanding this helped me stop fighting my brain and start working with it. I finally worked up the courage to send him a private message. Your post makes sense to me when nothing else does. I'm 20 and feeling like my life is over before it started. Not sure why I'm writing this. His response came within hours. I was 22 when I hit my lowest point. Different circumstances, same brain chemistry. Want a video chat? I've got time, and you sound like someone who could use a conversation with someone who's been there. The next evening, I found myself on a Zoom call with William, and the first thing that struck me was how normal he looked. I'd expected someone who'd survived himself to look either broken or artificially positive, but William just looked real, comfortable in his own skin, in a way I envied. So, tell me about your darkness, he said without preamble. What does it sound like in your head? For the next hour, I told him everything. The cascade of failures, the business disaster, the way my brain had become my own worst enemy. William listened without trying to fix anything, occasionally nodding like he recognized the territory I was describing. Joe, he said when I finished, I want to share something with you that changed my perspective completely. Are you familiar with Dr. Matthew Nock's work at Harvard? I wasn't. Dr. Nock has spent years studying what he calls psychological pain versus physical pain. His research shows that the brain processes emotional suffering using the same neural pathways as physical injury. When you say your thoughts are loud and crushing, you're not being dramatic. You're describing actual neurological activity. William pulled up a study on his screen. This research from Harvard's Laboratory for Clinical and Developmental Research shows that people experiencing severe psychological distress have measurably different brain activity patterns. You're not weak or broken. Your brain is responding normally to abnormal levels of stress. But knowing that doesn't make it stop, I said. No, but it changes how you fight it. I spent years trying to think my way out of depression, which is like trying to think your way out of a broken leg. The breakthrough came when I started treating my mental health like a physical injury that needed specific treatment, not just willpower. William mentioned his own story, a neuropsychological disorder that had derailed his law career and left him unable to function for 2 years. I lost everything I thought defined me: career, relationship, financial security, even basic cognitive abilities I'd taken for granted. How did you survive it? By learning that surviving yourself isn't about winning the war against your thoughts. It's about changing your relationship with them. Dr. Stephen Hayes at the University of Nevada developed something called acceptance and commitment therapy that completely shifted how I understood psychological pain. William explained that instead of fighting dark thoughts, the goal was to observe them without being controlled by them. Your thoughts are like weather patterns in your mind. You can't control the weather, but you can learn to dress appropriately and find shelter when needed. He referenced research from Dr. Kristen Neff at the University of Texas on self-compassion versus self-criticism. Her studies show that people who practice self-compassion recover from setbacks faster and achieve better outcomes than those who try to motivate themselves through self-criticism. But I deserve criticism, I said. I really have failed at everything. That's your depressed brain talking, not objective reality. Let me ask you something. If Emma came to you with the same problems you're facing, would you tell her she's worthless and should give up? Of course not. Then why is it acceptable to say those things to yourself? Dr. Neff's research shows that self-compassion isn't self-indulgence. It's actually more effective for motivation and resilience than self-criticism. William shared another study from Stanford's Dr. Jamil Zaki on social connection and mental health recovery. People who maintain meaningful connections during their darkest periods recover faster and more completely. Isolation makes everything worse. But I feel like a burden to everyone. That's the depression talking again. Your brain is telling you stories that aren't true, but feel true because you're in survival mode. Part recovery is learning to fact-check your own thoughts. As our conversation wound down, William made me an offer that surprised me. Joe, I run a peer support group here in Portland for people dealing with what you're dealing with. We meet virtually every week. Would you be interested in joining us? I don't know if I have anything to contribute. You just spent an hour describing exactly what millions of people experience but can't put into words. Your struggle isn't a liability. It's your qualification for helping others and yourself. Looking at William through the screen, someone who'd been where I was and somehow made it to the other side, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. The possibility that this wasn't permanent, that surviving myself was something people actually did. The question was no longer whether recovery was possible, but whether I was ready to stop fighting my own mind and start learning to live with it differently. William's support group met every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, which meant 9 p.m. for me on the East Coast. But somehow those 2 hours became the anchor point around which the rest of my week organized itself. The group was small, 6 people total, all between the ages of 19 and 40, all veterans of their own internal wars. The first thing we practice here, William explained during my first session, isn't positive thinking or goal setting. It's what Dr. Daniel Siegel from UCLA calls mindsight, the ability to observe your thoughts without being swept away by them. The exercise he taught us was deceptively simple. When a negative thought arose, instead of fighting it or believing it automatically, we'd practice saying, "I'm having the thought that," before stating the thought. So instead of "I'm worthless," you say, "I'm having the thought that I'm worthless," William explained. It creates distance between you and the thought. The thought becomes something you're experiencing, not something you are. The first week of practicing this felt ridiculous. I'm having the thought that this is stupid. I'd catch myself thinking, then realize I'd actually done the exercise correctly. But slowly, something shifted. The thoughts were still there. The self-criticism, the catastrophizing, the despair. But they started feeling less solid, less true, more like mental weather than absolute reality. William introduced us to research from Dr. Judson Brewer at Brown University about the neuroscience of habits and thought patterns. Your brain has practiced negative thinking for so long that it's become the default mode. We're not trying to stop the thoughts. We're practicing new responses to them. The group became a laboratory for testing these ideas. Marcus, a 28-year-old teacher, shared how he'd use mindfulness techniques during panic attacks. Sarah, a college student dealing with perfectionism, demonstrated how self-compassion helped her recover from academic setbacks faster. Each person's story became proof that the strategies William taught actually worked in real life. My first small victory came 3 weeks into the group when I had a particularly bad day. A rejection letter from a job I'd applied for, another argument with my dad about the business debt, a social media spiral that left me feeling completely behind in life. Instead of the usual pattern of diving deeper into self-hatred, I tried William's approach. I'm having the thought that I'm a complete failure. I'm having the thought that I'll never figure this out. I'm having the thought that everyone else has it figured out except me. Something strange happened. The thoughts lost their power to drag me into a 2-day depression spiral. They were still unpleasant, but they felt more like passing rather than permanent reality. That's not a small victory, William said when I shared this with the group. That's neuroplasticity in action. You're literally rewiring your brain's response patterns. But the real breakthrough came when William introduced us to what he called values-based action, rather than feelings-based action. Depression lies to you about what matters and what's possible, he explained, referencing research from Dr. Kelly Wilson at the University of Mississippi on acceptance and commitment therapy. Instead of waiting until you feel motivated or confident, you identify what matters to you and take small actions aligned with those values, regardless of how you feel. I realized that my values weren't about business success or impressing people. They were about contributing something meaningful, taking care of my family, and maybe helping other people who felt as lost as I had. This insight led to an unexpected opportunity. Instead of trying to revive the pet food business out of desperation, I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, using my experience with pet nutrition to help them improve their feeding programs. The work didn't pay anything, but it aligned with what I actually cared about. And for the first time in months, I experienced something I had forgotten existed: the satisfaction of being genuinely useful. You're starting to build what Dr. Martin Seligman calls authentic happiness, William observed. Happiness that comes from using your strengths in service of something larger than yourself. The shelter work led to other opportunities. The manager recommended me for a part-time position at a veterinary clinic. My experience with a failed business, instead of being just a source of shame, became valuable background for understanding pet nutrition and animal care. More importantly, I was practicing William's core teaching. You don't have to feel good to take good action. You don't have to believe in yourself to do valuable work. You don't have to have your life figured out to take the next right step. 6 months into group, I achieved something that would have seemed impossible during my 3 a.m. breakdown. I had a genuinely bad day, job stress, relationship disappointment, family tension, and instead of spiraling into self-hatred, I treated myself with the same kindness I'd show a friend going through a hard time. I'm having a really difficult day, and that's okay. I told myself, this feeling will pass. I can take care of myself while I wait for it to pass. The darkness was still there. The tendency toward negative thinking hadn't disappeared. But I'd learned to coexist with these parts of myself instead of being controlled by them. You're not cured, William explained during one of our sessions. You're developing psychological flexibility, the ability to experience difficult thoughts and feelings without being overwhelmed by them. Looking back, I realized that learning to survive myself wasn't about becoming a different person. It was about becoming a more skillful version of the person I already was. Someone who could hold space for both the darkness and the light, who could take meaningful action even when my brain was telling me nothing mattered. The war inside my head hadn't ended, but I'd learned to be a better general. 2 years after that 3 a.m. breakdown in my childhood bedroom, I'm sitting in a break room at a veterinary clinic where I now work as a nutrition specialist, and I'm realizing that surviving yourself doesn't end with some dramatic victory. It becomes a daily practice of choosing resilience over resignation, growth over stagnation, connection over isolation. The Joe who used to lie awake battling his own thoughts will be amazed by what's possible when you stop fighting your mind and start working with it. I'm not cured of depression or anxiety. Those tendencies are still part of my mental landscape, but I've learned to navigate them the way a sailor learns to work with wind and weather instead of being capsized by every storm. The veterinary clinic job grew out of my volunteer work at the animal shelter, which grew out of my failed pet food business, which grew out of my need to contribute something meaningful to the world. What once felt like evidence of my incompetence became the foundation for work that actually matters to me. You've got such a gift for explaining complex nutrition concepts to worried pet owners, Dr. Martinez told me during my recent performance review. Have you ever considered teaching or writing about animal health? The suggestion sparked something I hadn't felt in years: genuine excitement about a future possibility. I've started writing a blog about pet nutrition for anxious pet parents, and the response has been overwhelming. Turns out that my experience with failure and recovery makes me particularly good at helping other people navigate uncertainty. More importantly, I've become a peer mentor in William's support group, helping newcomers who remind me of my 20-year-old self, convinced they're uniquely broken, overwhelmed by thoughts they can't control, unable to imagine a future where they don't hate themselves. The thing about hitting rock bottom, I tell them, sharing something William taught me, is that it gives you a solid foundation to build from. You learn what you can survive, which turns out to be a lot more than you thought. Last month, I had what would have once been a catastrophic setback. A relationship ended. I made a significant mistake at work, and my car broke down all in the same week. 2 years ago, this combination would have sent me into a spiral of self-hatred that lasted months. Instead, I practice what William calls psychological first aid, treating my emotional state like an injury that needed care rather than criticism. I reached out to friends, maintained my daily routines, and reminded myself that setbacks are information, not identity. I'm having a really difficult time right now, and that's temporary. I told myself. I can take care of myself while I work through this. The difference wasn't that I didn't feel bad. I felt awful. The difference was that I didn't make feeling awful mean anything permanent about my worth or future possibilities. Emma, now 17 and applying to colleges, recently told me something that stopped me in my tracks. You know what I learned from watching you these past couple years? That it's okay to struggle as long as you don't give up on yourself. She was right. My breakdown and recovery had taught our whole family something valuable about resilience and mental health. Instead of being a source of shame, my struggle had become a bridge for honest conversations about the challenges everyone faces but rarely discusses. My parents, who once worried they'd fail me somehow, now understand that mental health challenges aren't anyone's fault. They're just part of the human experience that some people navigate more visibly than others. The pet food business debt has been slowly paid off through my clinic work. But more importantly, I've learned that financial success and personal worth are completely separate equations. I measure my life now by different metrics. Am I contributing something meaningful? Am I treating myself with kindness? Am I growing into someone I respect? Dr. William Bruce. He completed his PhD in psychology while recovering from his own neuropsychological challenges. Recently offered me the opportunity to co-facilitate support groups for young adults dealing with depression and anxiety. The idea of using my experience to help others navigate their own darkness feels like the most meaningful work I could possibly do. You've developed something powerful, William told me. The ability to hold space for other people's pain without being overwhelmed by it, and the credibility that comes from having walked the path yourself. This morning, I received a message from someone who found my pet nutrition blog. Your post about dealing with a sick pet when you struggle with your own mental health literally saved my sanity this week. Thank you for being honest about how hard everything can be. Reading that message, I understood something profound. The darkness I'd once seen as my greatest liability had become my greatest qualification for helping others. My struggle hadn't been meaningless suffering. It had been preparation for meaningful service. Tonight, as I write this in the same bedroom where I once contemplated giving up entirely, I want to say something to anyone who's fighting their own war against themselves. You are not broken. You are not uniquely flawed. You are not a burden on the people who love you. You are a human being dealing with the incredibly difficult challenge of being conscious in an uncertain world. Your thoughts are not facts. Your current emotional state is not your permanent identity. Your past failures are not predictive of your future possibilities. The darkness you're experiencing is real, but it's not the whole truth about you. There's light in you too, maybe dim right now, maybe barely visible, but it's there, and that light doesn't need to be bright enough to illuminate everything. It just needs to be bright enough to show you the next step. I faced the darkness and survived myself. Not because I was stronger or smarter or more deserving than anyone else, but because I learned to stop fighting my own mind and start working with it. Because I found people who'd walked this path before me and showed me it was possible. If you're reading this from your own 3 a.m. darkness, know this. You can survive yourself too. And sometimes that's the greatest victory of all.